world's most haunted places, creepy, ghostly, and notorious spots. It is by Life magazines. I do not own its content or its rights to this magazine. It has facts on Dracula's castle, the Queen Mary, the Psycho House, the Tower of London, the Shinings Hotel, and the Amityville Horror House. Those are a few. Those are a few that it has. The contents. Introduction. Ghostly Ghastly. US and Canada. Scary Spectre Latin America. Bloody Bone Chili Asia and Australia. Hair Raising Haunted Europe. Uncanny Earth. Unearthly Africa. Introduction by J.I. Baker. There is no end to the old houses with resounding galleries and dismal state bedchambers and haunted wings shut up for many years, through which we may ramble and encounter any number of ghosts. Charles Dickens once wrote, the great English writer might as well have added Polish caves, Babylon ruins, and Mexican mummy museums to his list of ghostly places, as we here at Life have done, bringing you a book filled with blood-curdling photos and eerie stories about the world's creepiest spots. Think the hotel that inspired The Shining, the Amityville Horror House, and the dilapidated farm that was home sweet home to the serial killer who inspired the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Silence of the Lambs, and Psycho. No, not all these spots are strictly haunted. Some, like Australia's Uluru, aka Ayers Rock, or the ancient ruins submerged under South Africa's Lake Titicaca, are deeply mysterious, maybe even spiritual. Others, like Kolmanskop, Africa's sand-covered ghost town, are downright unnerving, but they all have one thing in common. They seem to exist partly in the known world and partly in the shadowy realm we can't completely comprehend. So get ready if you dare to encounter any number of ghosts, ghouls, yetis, haunted dolls, and other things that go bump in the night. The Paranormal Prison, Alcatraz. On May 2nd, 1946, in what became known as the Battle of Alcatraz, 6 prisoners, overpowered guards, stole their weapons and tried to escape from the prison on this isolated island in San Francisco Bay. But when they realized they were missing the key, they needed to flee into the recreation yard. They grew desperate, took captives, and started shooting. Over the next 48 hours, 2 prison officers were killed and 18 injured. 3 would-be escapees were shot to death in the utility corridor between cell blocks, the very spot that 36 years later San Francisco radio anchor Ted Wiggett was exploring with a psychic when he was overcome by a feeling of violence and evil. I got this tremendous feeling of anger, he told the Travel Channel. I felt this presence beneath us in the dirt where these men had died. This is only one of many supernatural stories involving the so-called rock, which has been a civil war fortress, a bird sanctuary, and the birthplace of the American Indian Red Power movement. In addition to the brutal home of thousands of hardened convicts, rejected as unmanageable by other prisons, these men were called the incorrigibles. According to former inmate Leon Whitey Thompson, you step on a toe, it's gonna wind up in death. Many of these long departed inmates are now said to be unruly spirits. A spectral Al Capone has been heard practicing his banjo in the shower room. He was a member of the prison band the Rock Islanders. Mobsters Alvin Creepy Carpus calls the bakery and the kitchen home, while George Machine Gun Kelly has reported materialized in the chapel. But the most haunted spot in the prison, according to many paranormal investigators, is Deep Bog, the site of the infamous 1946 escape attempt on the island's best spooky story. Though the tale seems apocryphal, it's too good not to mention. A prisoner locked in cell 14D, one of the whole cells, supposedly screamed that someone else was in the dark, cramped space with him. When guards finally opened the door, they found him dead, strangulation marks from a spectral dagger on his neck. These little setbacks did not, however, prevent the late prisoner's ghost from showing up for roll call that night. Unlike so many haunted places, Alcatraz doesn't commercially capitalize on its reputation. In fact, the National Park Service calls the spooky stories flights of fancy, and thus the island's official Nora website. There are no authenticated cases of ghost sightings by any of Alcatraz Island's residents over the years, whether they were soldiers, prisoners, correctional officers, family members, or park rangers. The site reads, how would you authenticate a ghost sighting anyway? And former prisoner Thompson, for his part, believed the hype. This island is haunted, he said. It is the island of the damned. Give me a second. I'm trying to get my little night. Alright. The Psycho House. Ed Keene's farm. Somewhere in the Plainfield, Wisconsin, cemetery lies an unmarked grave belonging to the man who, thanks to his Hollywood influence, may be America's most infamous serial killer. In the same burial grounds lies what remains of the woman he dug up in the 1950s and turned into a perverse variety of handicrafts. Not surprising, the place is said to be haunted by the restless souls of one of the fiend's victims. Unnamed in death as in life, prowling the lonely graves. In November 1950, 1957, Plainville was shaken to its core after 58-year-old Bernice Warden, owner of the local hardware store, disappeared. Her son told the local sheriff that he'd found blood in the store and that a 51-year-old local handyman named Ed Keene had recently come in looking for antifreeze, tracing Keene down to the ramshackle, isolated farmhouse, where the odd man had lived alone since the death of his mother. The sheriff found Warden hanging by her feet, decapitated and eviscerated in the shed. But that was only the beginning of the horror. In the garbage-strewn house, law enforcement officers found chairs reupholstered with fatty human skin, a soup bowl made from a human skull, a shade bowl made of lips, masks made from human faces, a belt made of female nipples, a vest made from a female torso, embalming supplies and anatomy books, and detective magazines that Keene read by kerosene lamps. There were also human heads, one belonging to Mary Hogan, who had run a Plainfield tavern and had mysteriously disappeared in 1954. In the end, the remains of 11 women were discovered in the house, two of them, Hogan and Warden. Jeez. That's brutal. That's wow. Oh god, oh there's more. Keene claimed to have shot to death Keene claimed to have shot to death 9 had been, he said, unearthed from local graves. Many of them had been tanned. As with taxidermy, their flesh used by Keene as garments. The only immaculate part of the dwelling was the nail-shut room that had belonged to Keene's mother, Augusta. The fanatically religious woman had subjected her unstable son to ceaseless rants about the evils of women. Her alcoholic husband, George, died in 1940, followed by Keene's brother, Henry, under mysterious circumstances in 1944, leaving Keene to share the house with his mother, the love of his life. But when Augusta too died in 1945, Keene found himself alone. Well, almost. The necrophiliac bachelor started digging up graves using the remains of female bodies for company. He dressed in women's clothes, some fashioned from corpses, wishing that he had been born a woman. His mother had prayed for a daughter. Keene's oblivious neighbors found him mostly harmless. Ed Keene babysat for me once for about an hour. Local resident Miss George Foster told Life. Just sat there, ate peaches, and watched TV. Locals did, however, acknowledge that he was odd. He talked obsessively, for instance, about crime and women. Former girlfriend Adeline Watkins said, "We discussed every murder we heard about." Eddie explained the mistakes the murderer made. Declared insane in 1958, Keene died of cancer at the age of 77 in Mendota Mental Health Institute. But his perverse legacy endures, having inspired some of the greatest horror films ever made, among them The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Silence of the Lambs, and little-known classic called Deranged. But the most enduring product of the Keene legend began in 1959, when writer published a pop boiler called Psycho, which Alfred Hitchcock turned into the classic 1960 film. In it, Norman Bates, a character based on King, says a boy's best friend is his mother. Where Rosemary's Baby was born, the Dakota. When John Lennon and Yoko Ono moved into the Dakota on 72nd Street and Central Park West in 1973, they were aware the buildings was rumored to be haunted, so they hired a medium to conduct a seance in their 7th floor apartment and reached Jesse Ryan, the recently departed wife of Dirty Dozen actor Robert Ryan, who sold them the unit. The blithe spirit Jessie promptly announced that she intended to stay in the couple's digs, which did not make the Ryan's daughter Lisa happy. If my mother's ghost belongs anywhere, she told Ono, it's here with me. Most of the Dakota's spirit don't belong here, of course, but they seem to have been in residence since the building was completed in 1884. Built for Singer sewing machine president Edward S. Clark in Manhattan's then rural Upper West Side, the German Renaissance Revival structure was reportedly called the Dakota because its location was as remote as Dakota Territory. Over time, the Dakota's sinister reputation has grown along with its environs. This was, after all, where Lennon was murdered in 1980. Ono, meanwhile, still lives there, and Ira Levin used it as the setting for his classic 1967 novel Rosemary's Baby. Though the novelist called it the Black Bramford, he drew on the Dakota's dark mojo for inspiration. Over the years, one character said, the Bramford has had far more than its share of ugly and unsavory happenings. In Levin's world, these include cannibalism, witchcraft, Satanism, and murder, but he may well have added the real-life spirit of a beautiful blonde girl in a yellow dress. Some have called her the house ghost, others a bad omen. It's my birthday, she allegedly said to a painter who later fell to his death. Others have seen the ghost of a man with the face of a small boy, and the mysterious fire started inside writer Rex Reed's apartment. I thought, welcome to Dakota, he later told Stephen Birmingham in Live at the Dakota. Here, elevators move on their own. Footsteps are heard where no mortal walks. Rumbling sounds through the walls, and the past seem to coexist with the present. A chandelier was seen through the window of one resident's apartment as he walked to the building, despite the fact that he had no chandelier, only the remains of one. Many phenomena seem to emanate from the basement, including the so-called man with the wig, who is known for taking off his wig and shaking it angrily. In Levin's novel, Rosemary calls the basement kind of creepy. So does singer Robert Flack, a longtime resident who refuses to enter it. This building has been occupied by a lot of strong people, she told Birmingham. They stay, they have memories, they come back. The Edgar Allan Poe House, Baltimore. In early morning hours of September 27, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe left Richmond, Virginia, on a steamer heading to Baltimore. He wasn't seen again nearly a week later when he found a when he was found delirious, probably drunk, and wearing someone else's clothes in a Baltimore tavern, hospitalized. The great writer raved, repeatedly shouting someone's name, until on October 7th he muttered, "Lord help my poor soul," and died. Now, the museum, the Edgar Allan Poe House on Baltimore's Amity Street, is where the writer lived in the early 1830s. It is, locals say, haunted, but not by Poe's poor soul. Some have seen the spirit of a stout old woman dressed in the clothing of the early 1800s. Others have reported visitations of a specter known as Mr. Eddie. Doors and windows open and shut when no one is there. Visitors sometimes feel persisting tappings on their shoulders, and the neighbor has seen candlelight lights bobbing in the museum after closing time. Poe's ghost has been seen in the town's post area, Fells Point, where the writer seems to have wandered during his final days. A spirit affectionately named Edgar is said to prowl the horse you came in on saloon, Baltimore's oldest pub. And beginning in 1949, the mysterious person known as the Phantom Toaster toasted the writer with a glass of cognac at his grave every January 19th, Poe's birthday, leaving behind the unfinished brandy bottle and 3 red roses. But after vanishing in 2009, the toaster was thought to be quoted the Raven nevermore until a new toaster reignited the tradition in 2016. The Winchester Mysterious House, San Jose, California. There is something of the awful house of Usher about it. One journalist wrote of the Winchester Mystery House after it first opened to the public in San Jose, California in 1923. I, for one, would tremendously like to give a Halloween party in this old home. The rumors of the maze-like Victorian mansion started soon after its eccentric owner, Sarah Winchester, began her elaborate, idiosyncratic construction, and they continue to this day, fueled by a part by the guides who lead tourists to bizarre structures, odd nooks and crannies, past doors that open into walls, and up staircases that go nowhere. There are now 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. Tourists are warned against wandering off. They could be lost for hours. This is how the story goes. After losing both her only child and her husband in New England, Winchester, the heiress to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company fortune, consulted a Boston psychic. He told her that her family was cursed by the souls of American Indians and Civil War soldiers among them, who had been killed by Winchester rifles, the gun that won the West. The only way to placate those restless spirits was to build a rambling house for them to inhabit. Dutiful Winchester moved to California, where she bought an unfinished farmhouse in 1886. For the next 36 years, she renovated and rebuilt her home, reportedly hiring construction workers to work around the clock. As long as the hammering continued, the rumor went she could stay alive. The truth, however, is somewhat more complicated. Known in her youth as the Belle of New Haven, Winchester was later crippled with rheumatoid arthritis, and having lost her fabled looks, rarely ventured outside. Her obsessive need for privacy and refusal to speak publicly allowed yellow journalists and nosy neighbors to say anything they wanted about her with impunity, And of course, they did. But the fact remains that visitors and staff alike claim to hear footsteps and breathing, see apparitions from other eras, find locked doors suddenly open, and even smell chicken soup. In the end, the 1920s journalist was not far off when she compared the eerie structure to the House of Usher. Like Poe's melancholy domicile, the Winchester place remains a mystery all insoluble. Otherworldly New Orleans, Louisiana. One major U.S. city advertises rental apartments as haunted or not haunted, as if ghosts or amenities like air conditioning or a 24-hour doorman. If you guess Boston, you're wrong. We're talking, of course, about New Orleans, Louisiana, where spirited real estate sales are among the many reasons why the port city began. The Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain is considered the most unearthly urban enclave in the United States. How did the Crescent City become a ghost town? Literally. Maybe it has something to do with the multicultural mix of spiritual traditions, Native American, French, Spanish, Creole, Cajun, and not least voodoo, an, al- an amalgam of African religions and Catholicism, or maybe it's the fact that because the water table is so high, tombs called cities of the dead are all built above ground, leaving restless spirits to roam the steamy streets. There's a ghost story or a library of them on virtually every corner here, from the spirit of a suicide that haunts the Louisiana National Guard Armory to the legend of the Voodoo Queen Mary Laveau, interred in St. Louis Cemetery Number 1. Not long ago, a New York magazine editor in the city for a convention crawled into her hotel bed one night and immediately felt the presence of a man beside her. When he wrapped his arms around her, she was too terrified to scream and stayed awake in his arms until sunrise when he vanished. Maybe hotels here should take a cue from rentals advertising haunted and unhaunted rooms, along with continental breakfasts. The Witch Hunt Village, Salem, Massachusetts. The devil came to me and bid me serve him, said Tituba, the Caribbean slave who was working from Salem Villagers Ministry, Samuel Paris, when his young daughter and niece began to suffer fits in the winter of 1692, supposedly influenced by the Bayesian woman's fortune telling. The girls and their friends were so-called victims of witchcraft. Thus, the town's notorious witch hysteria began, driven by ever-increasing accusations from the coterie of possessed girls. The Salem court convicted and hanged 19 townspeople found guilty of witchcraft in 1692. But not all those souls went placidly to their unhallowed graves. In fact, 3 of them uttered hellish curses that some believe afflicted Salem to this day. A beggar named Sarah Good, having lost her unborn child in jail after being convicted of witchcraft in June 1692, was brought to Gallows Hill with 4 other witches, in quotation marks, in July, when Reverend Noyes tried to elicit a confession. A furious Good shouted. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink. In 1717, so traditions hold, Noya suffered an internal hemorrhage and choked to death on his own blood. More than 100 years later, Nathaniel Hawthorne, a descendant of the witch hunting judge John Hawthorne, used his curse to fuel the plot of his third novel, The House of the Seven Gables. The name of a Salem house that still stands. In the introduction to The Scarlet Letter, Hawthorne apologized for his ancestors' actions. A so-called warlock hurled imprecations to "Damn you, Sheriff," the elderly Giles Corey shouted as he was fatally crushed under stones placed in wooden planks in a field near Howard Street. Possibly the site of the current Howard Street Cemetery. I curse you at Salem. Hawthorne again. Tradition was long current that the ghost of Giles Corey, the wizard, appeared on the spot where he had suffered as the precursor of some calamity that was impending over the community. He was reportedly seen, for instance, in the Howard Street Cemetery that night before the Great Salem Fire of July 25th, 1914, which left half the town homeless. Corey was tortured for 2 or 3 days by High Sheriff George Corwin, who was ostracized by the town after the trials. When Corwin died of a heart attack in 1696, his family, not wishing to risk a vandalized grave, interred him in his basement on the same site now occupied by the Joshua Ward House. Naturally, or should we say supernaturally, it's haunted. In the 1970s, according to Rosemary Ellen Guiley, author of Haunted Salem, the last man to serve in the office of sheriff, the office no longer exists. Robert Ellis Cahill investigated the curse and wrote that all sheriffs, as far back as he could trace, either died in office or heart problems or retired with ailment of the blood. In 1978, Cahill's own stint as sheriff was cut short by heart disease, another curse which seemed to predict a future conflagration. This town shall burn, shouted Will Montred, who was among the final 8 victims to be hanged on Gallows Hill on September 22, 1692. Many years later, of course, Salem did in the aforementioned fire, but none of these new townsfolk would ever have thought to curse Salem with notorious brochures calling it bewitching, not to mention a 3D haunted adventure or a terror house that claims we're bringing scary back. One doubts Corey's ghost would agree with that assessment. There is even, heaven forbid, a statue of Elizabeth Montgomery, star of TV's Bewitched, honoring the episode of the popular show that were shot in the village where all hell broke loose, perhaps literally in 1692. Do you see the fearsome fort, Craig Dorotch Castle? Do you see the late John Dunsmuir reads the caption on his photo supposedly showing the ghost of a woman in Crash Rock Castle? The National Historic Site and Museum on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Though ghost photos are taken in supposedly haunted spots all over the world, they often involve tricks of the light or say Photoshop. But in this castle, they may as well be spectral selfies built by magnate Robert Dunsmuir. The Scottish baronial castle was completed in 1890, but the industrialist died before he could move in. His wife Joan took possession, but died herself in 1908 when not posing for photos. Joan's ghost has been seen descending the main staircase in a ball gown, and her tallow candles have been smelled on the second floor. She does not seem to be alone. In the basement, the spirit of a little girl has been seen staring sadly at the floor, and the crying of a child and music from playerless Steinway piano are sometimes heard echoing among the ornate woodwork and Victorian stained glass in the mansion 39 rooms. Plenty of other spots on Vancouver Island are said to be haunted too. Cameron Lake, for one, is the site of a wide range of reported paranormal activities, and the ghost of a Hawaiian axe murderer supposedly haunts the forest of Newcastle Island Park, not least nearby Vancouver's Dead Man's Island, once a burial ground for everyone from indigenous Indians to early settlers, as well as a quarantine station for smallpox victims, is now home to the haunted HMCS Discovery, a Royal Canadian Navy Reserve Division and shore facility. Many reservists have experienced unexplained activity here, including, according to the Vancouver Courier, disembodied voices, apparitions, and moving furniture, but at least one witness wanted further proof. If I have an encounter with ghosts, I want chains, a seaman said. I want the whole Ghostbusters effect. The Shining's Hotel, the Stanley. It all started with a dream. In September 1974, best-selling novelist Stephen King was on vacation with his wife at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. Wandering through its corridors, I thought that it seemed the perfect, maybe the archetypal setting for a ghost story. King has said, that night I dreamed of my 3-year-old son running through the corridors, looking back over his shoulder, eyes wide, screaming. He was being chased by a fire hose. This was, of course, the inspiration for King's classic 1977 novel, The Shining, in which the Stanley became the overlooked hotel of the writer's prodigious imagination. Built in 1909 by the inventor F.O. Stanley, the 140-room hotel has made the National Register of Historic Places, but when King visited it, had seen better days. Before such TV shows as Ghost Hunters made spirit hunting something of a national sport, the Grand Hotel was dogged by the rumor that it was haunted. That fact became paradoxically a draw after The Shining put it on the map. Today, the management plays up the hotel's reputation by offering access to a resident psychic day and night tours and family tours. Unlike Jack Torrance, visitors probably won't find a decomposing lady in room 217's bathtub, but the room is said to be home to the ghost of Elizabeth Wilson, a former maid known to climb into bed between unmarried couples. Other ghosts include Paul, the hotel's former maintenance man, who still enforces the hotel's strict 11 p.m. curfew by telling night owls to get out. A humming spirit named Lucy browses a concert hall, and a wraith called Eddie is known as Lothario, stroking female patrons' hair and kissing their cheeks. Once called the Stinky Man, he has since presumably found the spectral equivalent of soap. More than King's archetypal place for a ghost story. The Stanley is, according to former in-house paranormal investigator Lisa Nyhart, a Disneyland of spirits. The Amityville Horror House, Long Island, New York. On November 13, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald Defoe Jr. slaughtered the other 6 members of his family at 112 Ocean Avenue in the village of Amityville, New York. 1 year later, newlyweds George and Kathy Lutz bought the murdered family's stately waterside Dutch colonial. Its bargain basement price outweighs its gruesome reputation. Moving in with Kathy's 3 children from a previous marriage, the Lutzes soon, they later claimed, began experiencing phenomena that had nothing to do with the everyday horror of home ownership. Some examples: red eyes at the windows, swarms of flies, ooze seeping through the walls, cloven hooves in the snow, and sepulchral voices screaming, "Get out!" One theory behind the events: Reynold Defoe Jr. was no mere psychopath, but somehow possessed by the house's evil spirits, which may have emanated from the ancient Indian burial ground it was allegedly built on. Pleading insanity, Defoe said he heard voices that told him to kill his family. Unwilling to fall victim to the same forces, the Lutzes fled the house, leaving all their possessions behind. A mere 28 days later, after they had moved in, what began as a family tragedy soon morphed into pop culture juggernaut. In 1977, the book The Amityville Horror became not merely a bestseller, but a bona fide phenomenon. In 1974, the movie adaptation became the first entry in a widely successful horror franchise that has continued for decades. From the beginning, the alleged supernatural events were dogged by controversy, with some calling the whole thing a hoax. Defoe, for his part, later disavowed his demon defense, but it would have been a risk, to say the least, for the Lutzes, who were hardly wealthy, to leave behind a house they had just bought, staking their future on an elaborate lie. This was not, at any rate, your garden variety house flipping. To the end of their days, the Lutzes insisted that their story was true. Kathy died in 2004, followed by George in 2006. As to the horror house used in the movie, in 2012 it was on the market. Its original asking price of $1.45 million reduced to $955,000. Just 4 years later, it was listed again for $850,000, lowered to $605,000. In 2017, demons, no, another sort of domestic disturbance, divorce. The Headless Horseman haunts Sleepy Hollow, New York. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land and to pervade the very atmosphere, wrote Washington Irving of the titular town, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. His eerie 1820s story about also about it's a place. Is eerie. Okay, let's start again. The Headless Horseman's haunted. Sleepy Hollow, New York. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang around the land and to pervade the very atmosphere, wrote Washington Irving as the titular town in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. His eerie 1920s story about the lovelorn schoolteacher Ichiban Crane's encounter with the hell-bent Headless Horseman. The whole neighborhood abounds with local tales, haunted spots, and twilight superstitions. Though Irving invented the name Sleepy Hollow, the village formerly known as North Tarrytown was rechristened after the fictitious enclave in the late 1990s. Talk about life intimidating art. But what's in the name? 25 miles north of New York City, Sleepy Hollow is now a populous suburb, having long ago lost the bucolic atmosphere that so enchanted Irving. Look closely through, though, and you'll see the traces of the old superstitions abound. Sleepy Hollow's old Dutch church and burying ground, the oldest church in New York State, is for instance rumored to be haunted by Irving's infernal equestrian. Unlikely, given the specter was mostly the writer's invention. But what old cemetery doesn't have its ghosts? This is also the burial place of two women, Katrina Decker Van Tassel and her niece Eleanor Van Tassel Rush, either of whom may have inspired the character of Katrina Van Tassel, Ichabod's love interest. Disembodied whispers have been heard in the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery where Irving himself is buried. Writer's home, Sunnyside, which he designed, and where he lived out his last days, is said to be haunted by ghosts. Apparently, he likes to pinch female visitors. Irving himself claimed to have seen a ghost while he lived there, describing it as a young lady who wandered through the orchard. She is said to have died of love and green apples. His two spectral nieces have been seen cleaning up after the places closed. Nearby towns have had their share of spooks too. Irvington, guess who it's named after, is home to the Church of St. Barnabas, the home of a long dead former pastor and long former pastor's wife. Unearthly mist and dancing lights have been observed in Scottsborn Sparta Cemetery, the resting place of the so-called Leatherman, an eccentric, unidentified man who spent his life wandering around New York and Connecticut wearing nothing but a leather suit. Though Irving's famous tale has left a sometimes ridiculous legacy in the town that bears its name. Before it closed, you could order horseman bruschetta at the Horseman restaurant and pizza, for instance. Ichabod Crane endures on the library shelves and in our collective imagination, if nowhere else. At the end of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, Irving suggests that the lonely schoolteacher's voice can still be heard at a distance, chanting a melancholy psalm tune among the tranquil solitudes of Sleepy Hollow. The most haunted ship, the Queen Mary. Years after the legendary Queen Mary luxury liner was permitted docked as a hotel tourist attraction in Long Beach, California, a marine engineer named John Smith had an unsettling experience while prowling the ship. late at night. In a deserted staircase, Smith heard the sound of water rushing and men screaming, but no one was there. Later, Smith learned that in 1942, when the liner was being used in World War II, it collided with its companion vessel, the HMS Curacoa, on its way to Gorrock, Scotland. The Curacoa was immediately sheared in two and sunk, killing 338 men. The very area heard that mysterious water rushing was the exact same area that was damaged when the ship hit the Curacoa. Smith told Unsolved Mysteries, "It's not surprising that a more than 80-year-old ship with more than 1,000 ocean crossings had reported 49 deaths behind it would have a reputation of being haunted before it was retrofitted, painted gray, and used in the war as the so-called Grey Ghost. The Queen Mary began as luxury liner in 1936, ferrying the likes of Fred Astaire and Bob Hope across the Atlantic. But during the war, in addition to collisions, many German and Italian POWs carried on the liner may have died and did as did soldiers from heat stroke traveling in the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. We know that other deaths from natural causes, suicides, and accidents occurred, and there are still others that the owners tried to hide for a more dark and sinister reason," wrote Brian Clune in Ghost of the Queen Mary. Room B340 is widely believed to be the most haunted on the ship, the site where a family was allegedly murdered. But Clune says this is a fiction created by former owners who wanted to use the unoccupied space as part of a tourist attraction. The real site of the murders, Clune says, is room B474, which is, of course, haunted, as are the main deck, where a morgue and an isolated room were located during World War II, the engine room, the green room, and an area known as Shaft Alley. But the most spirited area on the ship may be the former first-class pool area, home to little Jackie, a 5 or 6-year-old girl who is perhaps the ship's most famous ghost. She is playful and talkative, her voice having been allegedly caught many times on tape. You can find examples on YouTube. Sadly, she is said to remain on the ship because she is looking for her mother, whom she sometimes cries out for. Another ballroom ghost is known as Grumpy, a growling cigarette-smoking spirit said to haunt the storage area beneath the pool, and choking sounds near Old Hospital area allegedly emanate from the ghost of an officer who died after drinking poison that he thought was gin. Still, other ghosts include the Lady in White, who is often seen dancing to unheard music in the Queen's salon, and the spirit of an 18-year-old crewman, John Petter, who was crushed by airtight door number 13 in Shaft Alley while playing chicken with his co-workers. These days, the Grand Ship capitalizes on, not to say exploits, its spooky reputation by offering haunted doors, interactive attractions, and seances. There's even dinner specials called Dining with Spirits, which allows you to pair paranormal investigations with more earbound spirits. Bloody Mary, anyone? Scary spectral Latin America, from Mayan tombs and Mexican mummies to underwater temples in the ancient lake. Latin America is home to some of the spookiest sights on Earth. Machu Picchu. Grave robbing is at best an unholy venture, wrote sociologist at Yale University Professor George Eaton, who was in a position to know a year after his colleague Karen Bingham became the first Westerner to uncover Peru's lost city of Machu Picchu. Easton helped a second Yale expedition unearth 52 ancient Inca graves in 1912. That August, Easton and two local Quechuan guides opened their 26th grave, finding a female skeleton with the knees pressed to the chest. Ian thought it was the body of a priestess, and his unnerved local helpers must have agreed. Soon afterward, one of them did not show up for work, citing pain in his below area. Then the second man disappeared. The fact that the people of Machu Picchu were helping dig up their dead ancestors led them to believe they were cursed. Mark Adams, author of Turn Right at Machu Picchu, told Life, at the very least, it meant that whatever spiritual significance the remains might have had was gone, inexplicably abandoned by the Inca 4 centuries ago. Machu Picchu is the most famous architectural ruin in the West. It's also one of the most mysterious. A fact that has fueled more than a few theories, from the scholarly to the superstitious. Was it a defense stronghold or a royal retreat? Was it built by space aliens? Is it gathering place for the ghosts of Inca priests? But the so-called curses may have been lifted. In 2012, Yale University returned the last batch of artifacts that had been stolen from Peru nearly 100 years before. The spirit statues, Easter Island. About 2,300 miles off the coast of Chile, Easter Island, otherwise known as Rapa Nui, is an isolated patch of deforested volcanic land that is one of the world's most remote inhabited island called Tepito de Henua, the navel of the world. By its Polynesian settlers, it is best known as the site of hundreds of moai, iconic stone heads sculpted from volcanic rock between the 10th and 16th century. The moai probably honor the islanders' ancestors. Two heads are the same. Many were somehow moved from the island's quarry to its perimeter. Even though they weigh up to 80 tons, they even have underground bodies. No one knows for sure how this feat of prehistoric engineering was accomplished, but some of the island's 5,000 inhabitants insisted statues walked or even flew into place, animated by mana and kind of spiritual force. Some claim they've seen apparitions or heard ancient voices near the moai. Others suggest the heads were moved by extraterrestrials, but we'll leave that to UFO theorist Erich von Daniken. The island's history is creepy enough with the paranormal overlay. The original population may have grown too quickly, leading to the dwindling of natural resources. Sound familiar? There is even evidence of cannibalism, but recent theories suggest that an infestation of Polynesian rats may have brought the people to their collective knees. All of this, of course, enough to even give Stephen King nightmares, with or without the moving statues. Oh wow. City of the Plundered Dead, the Mummy Museum. In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Benjamin Franklin once wrote, and the two were once gruesome, combined in the silver mining town of Guana, Guanajuato, Mexico. Between the 1860s and 1958, relatives were forced to pay tax to keep their dead loved ones buried in Santa Paula. Pantheon Cemetery was Santa Paula. If they couldn't afford the fee, the bodies were removed from the tombs, stored in the ossuary. Because of the dry, hot climate and the fact that the corpses had been kept in airtight crypts, some of the unearthly souls had become well-preserved mummies. When curious locals began asking to see the bodies, workers started charging for the questionable privilege, and that was the beginning of the Museo de la Momias de Guanajuato, which opened its doors in 1969. The museum showcases more than 100 mummies in climate-controlled glass cases. Their gruesome grimaces, the result of hardening tongues and slacking jaws. No, they were not buried alive, as some have suggested. There is even a row of babies called Angelitos and Santitos, dressed as angels and saints, respectively. The museum also contains what is believed to be the smallest mummy in the world, the remains of a 24-week-old fetus. Wherever dead bodies have been disturbed, you can be pretty sure there will be ghost stories, and this place is no exception. People have reported seeing the apparition of a tall lady and hearing strange whisper sounds and the cries of babies in the building. Perhaps trying to justify the display, the museum is careful to say that death is more widely accepted, even celebrated, in Mexico than in many other places. Fair enough, but it's a bit disconcerting to buy sugar skulls and souvenir effigies of mummies in a place where not so long ago impoverished people couldn't even pay to keep their loved ones buried. The heavens and hell. Chichen Itza. I can't read that one, but in the so-called Dresden Codex, one of the more extant pre-Columbian Mayan manuscripts, you will find hieroglyphic divination calendars, descriptions of New Year ceremonies, and instructions on how to find the local ring god, Chak. The codex was created sometimes between AD 1200 and 1250 by the astronomer priests who spent dark hours observing the heavens from the observatory of Chichen Itza and Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. El Caracol, the snail observatory, is where most hauntings in modern Chichen Itza are said to occur. As I strolled down the corridor, I saw a man eyeing me. One tourist is quoted in the International Directory of Haunted Places. He was angry about my being there. I sensed that he was not a priest or astronomer, but rather some kind of assistant. Odd, because the observatory was probably not a place of bloodshed, unlike the Great Wall Court, where a lethal game was played. The leader of the losing team was sacrificed and his severed skull used to mold the next ball. And recently, The skeletons of 6 sacrificed humans, including 2 children, were unearthed by Chichen Itza's Cenote Sagrado, a volcanic hole leading to an underground water source. The cenote may have been considered a portal to Xibalba, the Mayan underworld, where Chac lived, a major urban center since AD 750 or so. Chichen Itza probably began to decline in 1000, arriving in the 1500s. The Spanish conquistadors destroyed most of the codices, damning them as evil devil books. But thanks to the Tristan Codex, directions to Chalk's domain survive, along with perhaps the spirits of ancient astronomers. Where gods are made. Teotihuacan. About 30 miles outside Mexico City lie the ruin of pre-Columbian Teotihuacan. I can't say it. Once one of the largest and most influential cities in the world, built between the 1st and 7th century. No one is sure by whom or why. The civilization mostly disappeared after 750, possibly after an all-consuming fire. When the Aztecs rediscovered the abandoned spot in the early 14th century, they were stunned by its grandeur, calling it the place where gods are made, or the city of gods. But it was also a city of death, filled with evidence of human and animal sacrifice, clearly marking it as a spot of both brutal and sacred significance. Some of its mysteries are not exactly supernatural. Gold-colored spears were discovered in a hidden tunnel beneath the temple of the feathered serpent in 2013. A liquid mercury that may indicate the presence of a tomb was found in 2015, but a few visitors claim to have seen ghosts. Others have spotted the perhaps inevitable, if undocumented, UFOs over the pyramids. Check out the videos on YouTube. Purplish smoky streaks have appeared in photos. Ditto. Go ahead, blame Instagram filters or balloons, but since this place remains a mystery, why should its photographs be any different? This will be the last reading. I still have more to go, and I will continue on later. Again, I do not own or I do not own the rights to this magazine. So here goes the last story for the night. Until next time. The Drowned Girl's Exorcism. Island of the Dolls. Drifting in a boat through a tangle of narrow canals in Xochimilco, Xochimilco, Xochimilco. I'm trying. A district of Mexico City. By the way, I was trying to say Marigold that time. You will find yourself heading toward an isolated island, though it may seem like any other island at first. As you move closer, you'll start to see the dolls. Yes, dolls. But this is hardly the island of misfit toys, more like Chucky's dream vacation. It is called the Island of Dolls, Isla de las Muñecas. home to thousands of mutilated toys hanging from the trees and lying on the forest floor, eyeless skulls infested by insects. In the 1950s, Julian Santana Barrera, the island's hermit caretaker, allegedly found a drowned girl in a nearby canal, her doll floating alongside her. Later, when he heard crying and footsteps around his shack at night, he became convinced that he was being haunted by the girl's restless spirit. Attempting to appease the ghost, he hung her doll in a tree. When the haunting did not stop, Barara began hanging more dolls, creating an eerie amalgam of ritual offering of ritual offering a primitive art installation. In time, Barara came to believe that all the dolls were possessed and that the island was not only haunted but cursed. Some locals agree. Don't expect your boatman to join you on the island. For instance, some won't even look at it as they approach. Others say they have seen the dolls moving or opening their eyes. Still, others claim the toys whisper and gesture to passerby as if saying, "Join us." In 2001, Barrera reportedly drowned in the same spot as the girl. Locals believe he too now haunts the island, which has become a bona fide tourist attraction. Some visitors bring in dolls to add to the growing collection, including a wild-haired Barbie, clearly having left her dream house far behind. And that is it, folks. Have a good night, and I'll see you next time.